Well, joining us now is Director of PopCon UK, Popular Conservatives UK, Mark Littlewood. Mark, thank you very much. It's a bit of a worrying picture this afternoon. We've got government borrowing, the cost of government borrowing soaring. We've got the pound plunging, and Rachel Reeves is nowhere to be seen.
Who'd have thought it, Emily? I mean, I'm afraid this is what happens when you get to the end of the road of government spending too much, borrowing too much, not covering their costs through tax, putting tax still higher, thereby dampening growth. It's almost a perfect storm. Tom's quite right that government expenditure becomes harder if your cost of borrowing goes up. We're now just servicing the debt, not repaying a penny of it, just servicing the debt, costing us more than the education budget. It's absolutely unbelievable. And of course, with higher and higher taxes to try and meet this, you're actually making the situation potentially worse, because we're probably going to see growth flatline, possibly even a recession. Who knows? That means that tax revenues fall again, and the hole in the public finances gets bigger, and the markets get even more concerned about lending money, and gilt yields go up even higher. We do seem to be now caught into a doom loop that we need to urgently escape from. And it would be pretty good if the Chancellor of the Exchequer was able to come to the House of Commons and explain how or why.
But Mark Littlewood, I was told repeatedly by members of this government, by the Chancellor herself, that she's fixed the black hole in the public finances, that there was a £22 billion black hole and that has now been plugged. Although looking at the numbers in the budget, the Chancellor borrowed £40 billion extra. It's remarkable how little commentary the tens of billions of extra borrowing that the Chancellor engaged in actually got, all because she twiddled a debt rule.
Yeah, that's right, Tom. And of course, I would argue that they've shown considerable largesse on public expenditure as well, giving people who work on the railways a kind of no strings attached pay rise. So there doesn't appear to have been any drive to get spending down. And I think one of the things the markets will look at is the trajectory we're on. You don't need to solve Britain's entire fiscal problem by, Thursday week, but you do need to show people that you've got a serious plan to get it under control. And it's not obvious to me that Rachel Reeves does have a serious plan to get it under control. We are spending beyond our means. We have been doing so since 2001. That was the last year a government of any stripe balanced its budget. 25 years of the government spending money beyond the tax receipts and other receipts it brings in. That's a pretty bad state of affairs. Now, the government will say there are international headwinds here. That's what governments always say when things look pretty grim. But I'm always very fond of Warren Buffett's observation that when the tide goes out, you get to see who's swimming naked. And unfortunately, the UK economy is basically swimming naked. So I think at some point, this government's going to have to change course.
Well, Mark, on the same day as all this is going on and Rachel Reeves is nowhere to be seen, Liz Truss appears to be taking legal action against Sir Keir Starmer for repeatedly saying that she crashed the economy. Now people are accusing Rachel Reeves of crashing the economy.
Yeah, that's right. I have read the letter that Liz has sent to the Prime Minister. I'm not a defamation lawyer or expert, but she has sent a cease and desist letter. And at least in the public debate, I would say that the argument is this. Did Keir Starmer really and sincerely believe, and if so, based on what, that Liz Truss and the mini-budget crashed the economy? What was the metric that he was using? The economy didn't go into recession. In fact, in the short period of time that Truss was Prime Minister, it grew really rather better than the surrounding period of time. So was it that gilt yields, the cost of government borrowing, was too high? Was that the basis upon which Starmer and Reeves said the economy had been crashed? I mean, a rather hyperbolic description of a spike in gilt yields. Because if that was the metric that they were using, and I can think of no other, well, they've now crushed the economy even worse, because gilt yields are now higher. That is to say, money markets are more reluctant to lend the British government money now. They see it as a more dangerous thing to do than they did in the wake of the mini budget. So Keir Starmer's got quite a lot of explaining to do there, I would say.
Of course, Mark, it was a very turbulent period in October 2022, particularly because of pension funds and their liability-driven investments that were so heavily leveraged on government debt that if gilt yields spiked, pensions went completely haywire. Of course, that created a huge media moment. Perhaps that's what the Prime Minister was talking about.
Yes, well, that's true, but then it's difficult to blame that on Liz Truss. I think the Bank of England needs to shoulder a large amount of the blame here. And in fact, the Bank of England, I think it's a bit tucked away on their website, but have released their own report investigating what happened in the market turmoil of autumn 2022. And they reached the conclusion that it was basically 2/3 their fault. Now, if somebody puts their hands in the air and says it was 2/3 my fault, I would think it's at least 2/3 your fault. So unfortunately, but perhaps predictably, we've had political point scoring of blame the Tories and blame Liz Truss, and not enough of investigation into the rather more complex area of liability-driven investments and were pensions over-leveraged. And you actually need to dig into the weeds of that, which gets quite technical and nerdy to really understand what happened. But don't let GB News viewers believe that because Liz Truss wanted to make some modest reductions in tax in the autumn of 2022, that spooked the markets because of unfunded tax cuts. As I was saying just a few minutes ago, we've had unfunded government spending for a quarter of a century, running into hundreds of billions of pounds. So whether Liz succeeds in her legal action or not, I don't know, but I think it's a very useful contribution to public debate to try and nail down exactly what Starmer and Reeves mean when they talk about crashing the economy.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And as you say, these things are so technical sometimes that people hear one headline and that's just all that they're left in and they haven't delved into the detail there. Mark Littlewood, thank you so much for coming on, Director of Popular Conservatives.
Well, thanks for watching. And if you enjoyed that video, please make sure you give it a like and subscribe to the Popcon YouTube channel. You can also find out more about us on our website, popularconservatism.com, and you can follow us on social media. Details are in the show notes below.